The autumn wind howled through the mountains of Colorado Territory as 24-year-old Alina Rodriguez clutched her swollen belly, each step becoming more difficult than the last. Her worn leather boots slipped on the rocky trail as another wave of pain coursed through her body, forcing her to lean against a tall pine tree for support. She had been traveling alone for 3 days, fleeing from a situation that had become impossible to endure. Alina's husband, Marcus, had turned violent after losing their farm to gambling debts. What started as occasional drinking had escalated into regular beatings, and when she discovered she was pregnant, his rage had only intensified. The final straw came when he struck her stomach during one of his drunken rages, screaming that he didn't want another mouth to feed. That night, while Marcus lay unconscious from whiskey, Lena packed what little she could carry and disappeared into the darkness. Her destination was her sister Carmen's house in Denver, nearly 60 miles away, through treacherous mountain terrain. Alina had hoped to reach the main road, where wagons occasionally passed, but she had misjudged both the distance and her physical condition. The baby was coming earlier than expected, and she was completely alone in the wilderness with no help. In sight, as the afternoon sun began its descent behind the mountain peaks, Alina realized she was lost. The trail she had been following seemed to disappear into a maze of rocks and fallen logs. Her water had broken an hour ago, soaking through her simple cotton dress and making each step an agony of fear and desperation. The contractions were coming faster now, each one stealing her breath and forcing her to stop until the pain subsided. Through her tears of pain and exhaustion, Alina caught sight of something that made her heart leap with hope. Smoke was rising from somewhere deeper in the forest, thin and steady like it came from a chimney rather than a wildfire. Where there was smoke, there might be people who could help her deliver her baby safely, fighting through another contraction. That made her cry out into the empty forest. Alina stumbled toward the source of the smoke. The terrain was rough and unforgiving, with loose stones that threatened to send her tumbling down the mountainside. Her hands were scraped and bleeding from grabbing onto branches and rocks for support, but the sight of that precious smoke kept her moving forward. As she crested a small ridge, Alina saw the source of the smoke. Nestled in a small clearing was a rough log cabin, barely more than a shelter really. With a stone chimney from which the life-saving smoke was rising, the structure looked handmade and weathered, as if someone had built it themselves from the trees that surrounded it. A small garden plot beside the cabin showed signs of recent tending, with winter vegetables still growing despite the late season. Alina's relief was overwhelming. But as she approached the cabin, she began to worry about what kind of person lived in such an isolated place. Stories circulated about hermits and mountain men who avoided civilization. Some harmless, but others dangerous to travelers, especially women alone. However, her situation was desperate, and she had no choice but to seek help, regardless of the risks. The cabin appeared to be occupied, as evidenced by the smoke in the well-maintained garden, but Alina saw no signs of the inhabitant. A freshly chopped wood sat beside the front door, and various tools hung from pegs on the cabin's exterior walls. Everything looked neat and organized, suggesting that whoever lived here took pride in maintaining their remote home. As Alina approached the wooden door, another powerful contraction seized her, this one stronger than any she had experienced. She doubled over in pain, involuntarily crying out as her body prepared for the imminent birth. The sound of her distress echoed through the quiet forest, surely alerting anyone inside the cabin to her presence. She managed to straighten up and knock weakly on the rough wooden door, her knuckles barely making enough sound to be heard inside. "Please," she called out, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and pain. "I need help. My baby is coming." For several long moments, there was no response from inside the cabin. Alina began to panic, wondering if the smoke had been misleading, and the cabin was actually abandoned. She knocked again, harder this time, desperation giving strength to her tired arms. "Help me, please," she called out more loudly. "I'm in labor and I'm alone." Finally, she heard movement inside the cabin. Footsteps crossed the floor slowly, as if the inhabitant was being cautious about approaching the door. Alina held her breath, praying that whoever lived here would be willing and able to help her in her desperate situation. The door opened slowly, revealing a man who appeared to be in his early 40s, with graying brown hair and a full beard that hadn't been trimmed. In months, his clothes were simple and practical, made for mountain living rather than fashion. What struck Alina most were his eyes, which were kind and intelligent despite his rough appearance. The man looked at Alina's condition and immediately stepped forward, his natural instinct overriding any surprise or hesitation he might have felt about finding a pregnant woman at his door. "Ma'am, you need to come inside immediately," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "My name is Thomas, and I'm going to help you." Alina felt tears of relief streaming down her face as Thomas carefully helped her into the cabin. The interior was simple but clean, with a large stone fireplace providing warmth and light. A single room served as kitchen, living area, and bedroom, but everything was well organized and spotlessly maintained. "When did your labor begin?" Thomas asked as he guided Alina to his bed, which was covered with handmade quilts that looked both warm and clean. Thomas quickly assessed the situation with a calm efficiency that surprised Alina. Despite living alone in the mountains for what appeared to be years, he moved with the confidence of someone who knew how to handle emergencies. He immediately began gathering supplies from various corners of his small cabin, collecting clean cloths, a sharp knife, and a pot of water that he set over the fire to boil. "The contractions started this morning," Alina managed to say between waves of pain, "but I think the baby has been trying to come for hours now. I was trying to reach my sister in Denver when I got lost." Thomas nodded, his weathered hands surprisingly gentle as he helped Alina get more comfortable on his bed. "Don't worry about Denver right now. We need to focus on bringing this baby into the world safely. I want you to know that I've delivered babies before, so you're in good hands." Alina looked at him with surprise and hope. "You're a doctor?" "Not exactly," Thomas replied, arranging the supplies he had gathered. "But I spent several years as a field medic during the war, and I've helped with enough births to know what needs to be done. Animals and humans aren't so different when it comes to the basics of bringing new life into the world." As another contraction seized Alina, Thomas coached her through breathing techniques that helped manage the pain. His voice remained steady and reassuring, providing an anchor of calm in what could have been a terrifying situation. Alina found herself trusting this stranger completely, sensing that he genuinely cared about her welfare and that of her unborn. "Child, what's your name?" Thomas asked, as he prepared the cabin for the delivery, hanging additional oil lamps to provide better lighting and laying out clean cloths in an organized manner. "Lena Rodriguez," she replied, grateful for the distraction. "During a brief respite between contractions, I ran away from my husband. He was hurting me and threatening the baby." Thomas's expression darkened slightly at this information, but he kept his voice gentle and supportive. "You did the right thing getting away from that situation. No woman should have to endure violence, especially when she's carrying a child. You're safe here, and I'm going to make sure both you and your baby get through this." Alina felt a wave of emotion wash over her at his words. For months, she had felt completely alone and trapped, with no one who understood or cared about her situation. Finding this kind stranger in her moment of greatest need felt like a miracle, and she began to believe that perhaps there were still good people in the world who would help others without expecting anything in return. As the afternoon wore on, Elena's labor progressed steadily. Thomas proved to be remarkably knowledgeable and skilled, guiding her through each stage of the process with patience and expertise. He had clearly done this before, knowing exactly when to encourage her to push and when to tell her to rest and conserve her strength. "Tell me about yourself," Elena asked during one of the calmer moments, wanting to understand more about the man who was helping her bring her child into the world. "How long have you lived up here alone?" Thomas continued, his preparations as he answered, his hands never stopping their careful work. "About 8 years now. I came up here after the war ended, looking for peace and quiet. Got tired of being around people who only seemed to bring out the worst in each other." "Don't you get lonely?" Elena asked, wincing as another contraction began to build. "Sometimes," Thomas admitted honestly. "But I've found that solitude can be healing after you've seen too much violence and cruelty. I have my books, my garden, and the animals that visit. It's been enough." Elena sensed there was much more to Thomas's story than he was sharing, but she didn't press for details. Everyone had reasons for the choices they made, and she was simply grateful that his choice to live alone in the mountains had put him in a position to help her when she needed it most. As evening approached, Elena's labor intensified dramatically. The contractions were coming much closer together now, and Thomas could see that the baby would be born soon. He moved with increased urgency, making final preparations and positioning Elena for the delivery. "I can see the baby's head," Thomas announced, his voice filled with excitement and encouragement. "You're doing wonderfully, Elena. Just a few more pushes and you'll be holding your child." Elena summoned every ounce of strength she had left. Determined to bring her baby safely into the world despite the difficult circumstances, Thomas coached her through each contraction, steady presence giving her the confidence she needed to continue when the pain seemed overwhelming. The cabin, filled with Elena's cries of effort and Thomas's words of encouragement as the final stage of labor progressed. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the forest clearing where the little cabin sat like a beacon of hope in the wilderness.
One more push,"
Elena, Thomas said urgently. "I can see the shoulders. Your baby is almost here." With a final surge of determination, Elena pushed with all her remaining strength. Thomas's skilled hands guided the baby safely into the world. And suddenly the cabin was filled with the sound every parent longs to hear. The strong, healthy cry of a newborn child.
"Oh, it's a girl,"
Thomas announced, his voice thick with emotion, as he held the tiny, perfect infant. "You have a beautiful daughter, Elena." Tears streamed down Elena's face as Thomas carefully cleaned her newborn daughter and wrapped her in one of his own soft flannel shirts. The baby's cries filled the small cabin with the most beautiful sound Elena had ever heard, a testament to the successful delivery, despite the challenging circumstances. Thomas placed the tiny bundle in Elena's arms with the gentleness of someone who understood the profound significance of the moment. "She's perfect," he said quietly, his own eyes moist with emotion as he watched the new mother cradle her child. "Strong lungs, good color, and she appears completely healthy." Elena gazed down at her daughter's wrinkled pink face, overwhelmed by a love more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. The baby's tiny fingers curled around Elena's thumb with surprising strength, and her dark eyes seemed to focus on her mother's face with infant curiosity. "Thank you," Elena whispered to Thomas, her voice breaking with gratitude. "I don't know what would have happened to us if you hadn't been here. You saved both our lives." Thomas busied himself with cleaning up the cabin and tending to Elena's immediate needs, but she could see that her words had deeply affected him. There was something in his expression that suggested he had been waiting years to hear that he had made a positive difference in someone's life. "What will you name her?" Thomas asked, as he prepared a simple meal for Elena. Knowing that she would need nourishment to recover her strength and begin nursing her daughter, Elena considered the question, looking down at the precious face of her child. "Hope," she said finally. "Her name is Hope Rodriguez. Because finding you here gave me hope when I thought all was lost." The simple meal Thomas prepared consisted of venison stew, fresh bread, and herbal tea that he explained would help with Elena's recovery. She ate. Elena was amazed by the quality and care that had gone into the preparation. This hermit, living alone in the mountains, was clearly more civilized and skilled than many people she had known in town. "You're an excellent cook," Elena observed, feeling strength returning to her body as she ate. "And everything in your cabin is so well organized and clean. You live better than many families, I know." Thomas smiled slightly, the first real smile Elena had seen from him since her arrival. When you live alone, you learn to take care of yourself properly, or you don't survive very long. I've had plenty of time to perfect the domestic skills I never learned growing up. As night fell completely, Thomas made arrangements for Elena and baby Hope to sleep comfortably while he took a blanket and settled himself in a chair by the fireplace. Elena protested that she was taking his bed, but Thomas insisted, explaining that he often slept in the chair anyway when the mountain nights were particularly cold. "I can't impose on your hospitality any longer than necessary," Elena said, though she was secretly grateful for his kindness. "Tomorrow, I should try to continue to Denver to find my sister. Thomas shook his head firmly. You just gave birth. A few hours ago, you'll need at least a week to recover enough strength for travel, especially through mountain terrain. Besides, traveling with a newborn in this weather could be dangerous for both of you. Alina knew he was right, but she worried about being a burden on someone who had chosen to live alone. I have a little money, she offered. I can pay you for food and shelter. I don't want your money, Thomas replied, his tone gentle but definitive. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need to recover. It's been a long time since I've had company, and I find I'm enjoying the conversation more than I expected. Over the next few days, Alina began to understand more about the man who had become her unlikely savior. Thomas was clearly educated. With several books visible around the cabin covering subjects from medicine to philosophy to agriculture, his speech patterns and mannerisms suggested he had come from a good family and received proper schooling before whatever circumstances brought him to his mountain hermitage. During their conversations, Alina learned that Thomas had served as a medic in the Civil War, treating wounded soldiers on both sides of the conflict. The experience had left him with valuable medical knowledge, but also with emotional scars from witnessing so much death and suffering. He had come to the mountains seeking peace and solitude to heal his troubled spirit. I used to dream of saving lives, Thomas confided one evening, as they sat by the fireplace while baby Hope slept peacefully in her makeshift cradle. But the war taught me that for every life I saved, 10 more were lost to violence and hatred. I began to feel like my efforts were meaningless. Alina looked at him with deep understanding. But you did save lives. You saved mine and Hope's. That has to count for something. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames of the fire. I suppose it does. I just never expected to get another chance to make that kind of difference. As Alina regained her strength, she began helping Thomas with daily tasks around the cabin. She cooked meals while he tended to his garden and prepared firewood for the approaching winter. They developed an easy partnership, working together efficiently despite having known each other for only a few days. Alina was impressed by Thomas's knowledge of herbs and natural remedies. He had created several teas and poultices that helped with her recovery, and he seemed to have an intuitive understanding of what both she and the baby needed to thrive in their current situation. Where did you learn so much about healing, Alina asked as Thomas prepared another batch of his recovery tea. Some from my military training, Thomas explained, but much of it from an elderly Cherokee woman who lived near here when I first arrived. She taught me about the healing properties of local plants in exchange for help with heavy labor around her home. She passed away 3 years ago, but I'll always be grateful for what she shared with me. Alina began to realize that Thomas was far more complex than the simple hermit she had first imagined. He was a man of education and skill who had chosen isolation not from misanthropy, but from a deep woundedness that was slowly beginning to heal through their unexpected encounter. A week into Alina's recovery, an unexpected visitor arrived at Thomas's remote cabin. Alina was nursing baby Hope by the fireplace when they heard the sound of horse hooves approaching through the forest. Thomas immediately became tense, moving to the window to peer through the rough-hewn shutters he had installed for privacy and protection. Someone's coming, Thomas said quietly, his hand instinctively moving toward a rifle that hung over the fireplace. It's unusual for anyone to find this place. I chose this location specifically because it's difficult to locate. Alina felt a chill of fear run through her. Do you think it could be Marcus? Could my husband have tracked me here somehow? Thomas studied the approaching rider more carefully. Wait. It's a woman, traveling alone. She looks determined, but not threatening. He paused, then added with surprise, she appears to be heading directly for the cabin, as if she knows exactly where she's going. The rider turned out to be a woman in her early 30s with dark hair and features that bore a striking resemblance to Alina. She dismounted from her horse with practiced ease and approached the cabin door with purposeful steps. Alina. A woman called out before Thomas could challenge her presence. Lena, are you in there? It's Carmen. Lena gasped with relief and joy. It's my sister. Carmen found me. She struggled to stand, still weak from childbirth, but desperate to reach her sister who had traveled so far to find her. Thomas opened the door cautiously, still uncertain about the situation despite Elena's obvious recognition of the visitor. Carmen Rodriguez Martinez was a woman of medium height, with intelligent brown eyes and an air of determination that suggested she was accustomed to handling difficult situations. "Alina, thank God you're alive," Carmen said, rushing into the cabin and embracing her sister carefully, mindful of the baby she held. "When you didn't arrive in Denver, I was terrified that something terrible had happened to you. How did you find me?" Alina asked, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I got lost in the mountains and thought I might never see you again." Carmen glanced at Thomas with curiosity and gratitude before answering. "I hired a tracker in Denver when you didn't arrive. He followed your trail to this area, and local trappers mentioned seeing smoke from this cabin. I came here hoping someone might have seen you pass through." Thomas stepped forward, extending his hand to Carmen in greeting. "Ma'am, I'm Thomas Watson. Your sister arrived here a week ago in labor, and I was able to help her deliver her baby safely." Carmen shook Thomas's hand warmly, her eyes showing deep appreciation. "Mr. Watson, I cannot thank you enough for what you've done. Selena wrote to me about her situation with Marcus, and I've been worried sick about her safety." Alina looked between her sister and Thomas, suddenly realizing that Carmen's arrival meant she would soon be leaving the mountain cabin that had become a refuge for both her and baby Hope. The thought filled her with unexpected sadness. She had grown comfortable in the peaceful environment Thomas had provided. "I brought supplies and a wagon," Carmen continued, "so we can travel back to Denver safely. I've already spoken with a lawyer about Elena's situation, and we can make sure Marcus won't be able to find or hurt her again." Thomas nodded approvingly. "That's wise. Alina and the baby are strong enough for travel now, and she'll be much safer with family in a proper town." However, Alina could see something in Thomas's expression that suggested her departure would affect him more than he was willing to admit. Over the past week, they developed a comfortable partnership and genuine friendship that had clearly meant a great deal to both of them. Carmen spent the afternoon getting acquainted with baby Hope and hearing the full story of Elena's dramatic arrival at the mountain cabin. She was impressed by Thomas's medical knowledge and the quality of care he had provided for both mother and child. "You have remarkable skills, Mr. Watson," Carmen observed. "Have you ever considered returning to civilization? Denver has a shortage of qualified medical practitioners, and someone with your abilities could help many people." Thomas shook his head politely. "Thank you, but I'm content with my life here in the mountains. I found the peace I was looking for, and I'm not ready to give that up." Carmen accepted his response graciously, but Alina could see that her sister was studying Thomas carefully, perhaps recognizing the same qualities that had impressed Alina during their week together. That evening, as they prepared for Carmen and Elena's departure the following morning, Thomas seemed quieter than usual. He busied himself with practical tasks, ensuring that Alina had everything she needed for the journey and that baby Hope was properly bundled for travel. Thomas, Alina said during a quiet moment when Carmen was outside tending to her horse, "I want you to know that this week has meant more to me than I can express. You didn't just save my life and Hope's life. You showed me that there are still good people in the world who will help others without expecting anything in return." Thomas paused in his preparations, his weathered hands stilling as he considered her words. "Alina, having you and Hope here has reminded me why I became a medic in the first place. I had forgotten the joy of bringing new life into the world instead of just trying to prevent death." Alina reached out and touched his arm gently. "Could have that joy again if you wanted it." Carmen was right about Denver needing qualified medical help. It could make a real difference in many people's lives. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fireplace where the flames danced and flickered. "I've been alone for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to live among other people anymore." "I think you remember just fine," Alina replied. "Softly, you've taken better care of me and Hope than most people would have, even family members. You have a gift for healing, and I think you're ready to share that gift with the world again." That night, as Thomas lay in his chair by the fireplace and Alina settled into his bed for the last time, both of them struggled with the knowledge that their brief time together was coming to an end. The mountain cabin had become a sanctuary for both of them, a place where Alina had found safety and Thomas had rediscovered his purpose in helping others. The morning of departure arrived with a crisp mountain chill that made Thomas's cabin feel even more like a cozy sanctuary that Alina was reluctant to leave. Baby Hope seemed to sense the change in atmosphere, fussing more than usual as Alina Prepared for the journey to Denver with her sister Carmen, Thomas had risen before dawn to prepare supplies for their travel. Packing extra food, warm blankets, and herbal medicines that would help Alina continue her recovery during the journey. His movements were efficient but subdued, and Alina could see that he was struggling with their departure as much as she was. "I've prepared enough of the recovery tea to last you 2 weeks," Thomas explained as he handed Alina a carefully wrapped package. "And these herbs will help if Hope develops any digestive troubles during the journey." Carmen observed the interaction between her sister and Thomas with growing interest. As someone who had learned to read people's emotions through her work, managing her late husband's business interests, she could clearly see the bond that had formed between Alina and the mountain hermit. "Mr. Watson," Carmen said carefully, "I hope you'll consider visiting us in Denver sometime. Alina will need friends as she rebuilds her life, and I would welcome the opportunity to show you our appreciation for what you've done." Thomas nodded politely, but made no commitment. "Your sister is a remarkable woman, Mrs. Martinez. She'll do well in Denver with your support." As they loaded Alina's few possessions and baby Hope into Carmen's wagon, Thomas made a discovery that would change everything. Hidden among Alina's belongings was a small leather journal that had fallen open to reveal pages of carefully written observations about medicinal plants and healing techniques. "Alina, did you write this?" Thomas asked, holding up the journal with surprise and admiration. Alina blushed slightly, embarrassed to have her private writings discovered. "I started keeping notes about the remedies you taught me. I thought maybe someday the information might be useful to someone else." Thomas flipped through several pages, his amazement growing as he read Alina's detailed descriptions of his healing methods and the plants he had shown her around the mountain cabin. Her writing was clear and precise, with careful diagrams and notes that showed she had absorbed far more of his knowledge than he had realized. "This is remarkable work," Thomas said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "You have a natural aptitude for medical observation and documentation. These notes could be invaluable to other healers." Carmen looked over Thomas's shoulder at her sister's journal, her business-trained mind immediately recognizing the potential value of the information. "Alina, you never told me you were interested in medicine." "I never thought I was," Alina replied honestly. "But watching Thomas work, learning about the healing properties of plants and herbs, it felt natural to me. I wanted to remember everything so I could help other people if they needed it." Thomas closed the journal carefully and handed it back to Alina, but his expression had changed dramatically. The spark of interest and purpose that Alina had seen flickering in his eyes over the past week was now burning much brighter. "Alina," Thomas said slowly, as if working through an idea that was just forming in his mind, "what if there was a way to combine your natural ability with formal medical training? What if you could become a real healer, someone who could help women and children who don't have access to proper medical care?" Carmen stepped forward, intrigued by the direction of the conversation. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Watson?" Thomas looked between the two sisters, his excitement growing. As he continued to develop his idea, "There are programs in Denver and other cities where women can train as midwives and nurses. Alina has already demonstrated natural skill and intuition for healing. With proper training, she could provide medical care specifically for women and children, filling a desperate need in frontier communities." Alina felt her heart racing at the possibility Thomas was describing. During her week in the mountain cabin, she had discovered a passion for healing that she never knew existed. The idea of turning that passion into a way to help other women in situations like her own was both thrilling and terrifying. "But I have no formal education," Alina protested. "I can barely read and write beyond the basics. How could I possibly learn enough to become a real healer?" Thomas smiled, the first truly joyful expression Alina had seen from him since they met. "I could teach you. I have medical books, practical experience, and knowledge of both traditional and herbal healing methods. If you're serious about pursuing this path, I could help you develop the skills you need." Carmen looked thoughtful as she considered the implications of Thomas's proposal. "You would come to Denver to teach Alina? What about your life here in the mountains?" Thomas glanced around at the cabin and clearing that had been his refuge for 8 years, then looked back at Alina holding baby Hope in her arms. "I've been hiding up here long enough. Maybe it's time I rejoined the world and started using my knowledge to help people again. Alina felt tears welling up in her eyes at the possibility that Thomas might be willing to leave his mountain sanctuary to help her pursue a dream she had only just discovered. "Thomas, I can't ask you to give up your peaceful life for my sake." "You're not asking," Thomas replied gently. "I'm offering because I believe this is what we're both meant to do. You have a gift for healing, Alina, and I have the knowledge to help you develop that gift. Together, we could make a real difference in the lives of women and families who desperately need medical care." Carmen stepped between them, her practical nature asserting itself. "This is a major decision for both of you. Perhaps we should discuss the details more thoroughly before making any commitments." Over the next several hours, the three adults worked out the logistics of Thomas's proposal. He would spend another week closing up his mountain cabin for an extended absence, then travel to Denver where he would live in a small apartment Carmen could arrange. Alina would study with him while caring for baby Hope, gradually developing the skills needed to work as a midwife and healer. The plan addressed Alina's need for both education and a way to support herself and her daughter independently. It also gave Thomas a purpose beyond his mountain solitude, while allowing him to ease back into civilized society gradually. As the sun began to set on what should have been their day of departure, Alina realized that instead of ending her time at the mountain cabin, they were actually beginning a new chapter of their lives together. 2 years later, Alina stood in the doorway of the small clinic she had established in one of Denver's poorer neighborhoods, watching as Thomas examined a pregnant woman who had walked 5 miles to receive care. The simple wooden building bore a hand-painted sign that read Rodriguez Watson Medical Practice, Women and Children's Care. Representing the partnership that had grown from their chance meeting in the Colorado mountains, Alina had proven to be an exceptional student. Thomas's medical knowledge, with the same natural aptitude she had shown during her recovery at his cabin. Under his careful instruction, she had learned anatomy, pharmacology, obstetrics, and the delicate art of helping women through the challenges of pregnancy and childbirth. More importantly, she had developed the confidence to trust her own instincts. When making medical decisions, the clinic served women who couldn't afford the expensive services of the city's established doctors, many of whom refused to treat unmarried mothers, immigrant women, or families who couldn't pay their fees immediately. Alina and Thomas had filled a crucial gap in Denver's medical services, providing compassionate care to those who needed it most. Baby Hope, a healthy toddler with her mother's dark eyes and bright curiosity, played quietly in a corner of the clinic while Alina worked. The little girl had grown up surrounded by the sounds of healing and helping others. She seemed to instinctively understand the importance of the work her mother and Thomas were doing. Mrs. Rodriguez, Thomas, called from the examination room, using the professional title Alina had chosen to maintain for her practice. "Could you assist me with Mrs. Patterson? Her labor is progressing more quickly than expected." Alina quickly washed her hands and joined Thomas in the delivery room, where a young woman was experiencing her first childbirth. Over the past 2 years, Alina had assisted with dozens of births, but each one still filled her with the same sense of wonder and purpose she had felt when Hope was born. "You're doing wonderfully, Mrs. Patterson," Alina said soothingly as she took her position beside Thomas. "Your baby will be here very soon." The delivery proceeded smoothly, with Thomas and Alina working together with the seamless coordination they had developed through months of collaboration. Within an hour, Mrs. Patterson was holding her healthy son, tears of joy streaming down her face as she thanked her caregivers repeatedly. After Mrs. Patterson and her baby were settled comfortably, Thomas and Alina sat down to review the day's cases and plan their treatments for the following day. This had become their evening routine, combining professional consultation with the comfortable companionship of 2 people who genuinely respected and cared for each other. "I received a letter from Dr. Harrison at the medical college today," Thomas mentioned as he updated their patient records. "He's formally recommended that you apply for their midwifery certification program. With your practical experience and the theoretical knowledge you've gained, you could earn official credentials within 6 months." Alina looked up from the herbal preparations she was organizing, her face showing both excitement and apprehension. "Do you really think I'm ready for formal certification? Sometimes I still feel like I'm pretending to be something I'm not." Thomas smiled at her concern, remembering his own early doubts about his medical abilities during the war. "Alina, you've successfully delivered 37 babies without losing a single mother or child. You've treated infections, complications, and emergencies with skill that many trained doctors would envy. You're not pretending to be a healer anymore. You are one." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the clinic door. Alina opened it to find Carmen standing outside with a man she didn't immediately recognize. Her sister's expression showed a mixture of concern and determination that Alina had learned to associate with important news. "Alina, I need to speak with you privately," Carmen said, glancing meaningfully at the stranger beside her. "This is Sheriff Morrison from Millbrook. His news about Marcus." Alina felt her blood run cold at the mention of her former husband's name. For 2 years she had lived in peace, building her new life without fear of Marcus tracking her down. The thought that he might have found her filled her with the same terror she had felt when she first fled into the mountains. Thomas immediately moved to Elena's side, his protective instincts activated by her obvious distress. "What kind of news?" he asked the sheriff, his voice calm but alert. Sheriff Morrison removed his hat respectfully before speaking. "Ma'am, I'm afraid Marcus Rodriguez died 3 weeks ago in a saloon fight in Colorado Springs. He'd been drinking heavily and got into an argument over a poker game. The other man shot him in self-defense, and there were plenty of witnesses to confirm it was justified." Alina sank into a chair, overwhelmed by a complex mixture of emotions she hadn't expected to feel. Relief that Marcus could never hurt her. Or hope again was accompanied by sadness for the waste of a life that might have been different under other circumstances. "There's more," Sheriff Morrison continued gently. "Before he died, Marcus sold your old property to pay his gambling debts. However, he had been telling people around town that he was looking for you and the baby. I wanted to make sure you knew. He was no longer a threat." Carmen placed a comforting hand on her sister's shoulder. "Alina, you're completely free now. You never have to worry about him finding you or trying to take hope away." Thomas knelt beside Elena's chair, his weathered hand covering hers with gentle reassurance. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You and Hope are both safe, and you can move forward with your life without looking over your shoulder." After Sheriff Morrison left, Alina sat quietly with Thomas and Carmen, processing the news of her former husband's death. The somber mood climbed into her mother's lap and snuggled close, providing the innocent comfort that only children can offer. "I should feel relief," Alina said finally, "and I do. But I also feel sad for the man Marcus could have been if he hadn't let anger and alcohol destroy him." Thomas nodded with understanding. "It's natural to mourn the loss of what might have been, even when someone has hurt you badly. It shows that your heart hasn't been hardened by the pain you experienced." Over the following weeks, Alina found herself approaching her work with renewed energy and purpose. The knowledge that she was truly free from her past allowed her to embrace her future completely. She applied for the formal midwifery certification program and threw herself into her studies with passionate determination. Thomas watched Elena's transformation with deep satisfaction, knowing that he had played a role in helping her discover her true calling. The hermit, who had once believed his healing days were over, had found new purpose in teaching and mentoring someone whose natural gifts surpassed even his own abilities. On a quiet evening, 6 months later, as they closed the clinic after another successful day, Alina made an announcement that surprised even Thomas with its emotional impact. "I've been thinking about our partnership," Alina said as she locked the clinic door. "We've accomplished so much together, and I want to make sure our arrangement continues indefinitely." Thomas looked at her with curiosity.
What exactly are?
"You proposing?" Alina took a deep breath, gathering courage for what she wanted to say. "I'm proposing that we become real partners, not just in our medical practice, but in life." "Thomas Watson, will you marry me?" Thomas stared at her in amazement, his weathered face showing emotions he had kept carefully hidden for 2 years. "Alina, are you certain? I'm 12 years older than you, and I spent so many years as a hermit that I'm not sure I know how to be a proper husband." Alina smiled with the same confidence she had developed in her medical practice. "Thomas, you've already proven you know how to care for people, how to heal them, and how to help them become the best versions of themselves. You've been a father to Hope and a partner to me in every way that matters. I can't imagine my life without you in it." As Thomas pulled Alina into his arms outside the clinic they had built together, Both of them understood that their story had come full circle. What had begun with a desperate plea for help in the Colorado mountains had become a love story that would continue to heal and help others for the rest of their lives together.